Look, I used to be the guy everyone handed their weed to at parties. Hey, Eddie, roll this up for me? I was that good. Could roll a perfect joint in 30 seconds flat, even in the dark, even after a few beers. It was a skill, almost a point of pride. But here's the thing, I almost never smoke joints anymore, and once you hear why, you might reconsider too. Before you think this is some preachy anti-joint crusade, relax. I'm not here to tell you what to do with your cannabis. Smoke it however you want. That's your choice, your lungs, your life. But I am going to lay out some facts that most people don't think about when they're rolling up. Facts about waste, about health, about efficiency, and yeah, I'll also talk about why joints are still awesome in certain situations, because they absolutely are. We're talking about joints here, but also spliffs, blunts, and those pre-rolls you grab at dispensaries. They all share one thing in common. You're smoking cannabis wrapped in some kind of paper. That simple fact creates most of the issues we're going to discuss. If you don't know the difference, let me break it down quick. A joint is just ground cannabis rolled in cigarette paper. A spliff is cannabis mixed with tobacco, rolled the same way, common in Europe, not my thing at all since I don't smoke tobacco. A blunt uses cigar wraps or tobacco leaves instead of regular rolling papers, creating those massive things we used to call fatties back in the day. Some people put tobacco in blunts too, making them even heavier. And pre-rolls are the ready-made joints you buy at dispensaries, which deserve their own discussion because honestly, most of them are garbage. But that's a whole other conversation. The point is, all of these involve combusting paper along with your cannabis. Keep that in mind as we dig deeper. Let's start with the good stuff, because joints absolutely have their place and their appeal. I get it. I've been there. I've lived that life. There's genuine romance to rolling and smoking joints. It's ritualistic, almost meditative. Remember that song, Don't Bogart That Joint by Little Feat? If you do, you're probably around my age, and you remember that whole era. Fun fact, Little Feat didn't even write it. They covered it from someone else. But that song captured something real about the culture. The ceremony of cleaning your flower, breaking it down just right, rolling it up carefully, lighting it, passing it around with friends. Maybe you're sitting around a campfire. Maybe you're in someone's basement listening to records. Maybe you're at a festival. There's community in that shared experience. Something timeless and connective about passing a joint in a circle. I completely understand why people love that aspect. It's not just about getting high. It's about the experience, the tradition, the social bonding. That matters. That's real. And I'm not going to pretend it doesn't have value just because I personally don't smoke joints much anymore. The other major advantage is pure convenience and portability. Picture this. You're heading to a concert or some outdoor event. You're driving there, which means you obviously don't want to consume beforehand because driving impaired is stupid and dangerous, unless maybe you're just going around the corner. But generally, don't do it. But you do want to enjoy cannabis once you arrive. What's the easiest solution? A joint. You roll it up at home, slip it in your pocket, and you're good to go. When you get there, you find a discreet spot, spark it up, take your hits, and you're done. No carrying around bulky pipes or bongs, no worrying about water spilling in your bag, no dealing with butane lighters that might leak. Just a simple, compact, portable delivery system that does the job. In public settings where cannabis is legal but you still want to be relatively low-key, joints work. They're familiar to people, they don't look intimidating or complicated. You can smoke one in appropriate public areas without drawing much attention. Try doing that with a foot-tall bong. So yeah, joints have genuine advantages: convenience, portability, tradition, and social appeal. These are real benefits that matter to real people in real situations. I'm not dismissing any of that. But here's where we get into the problems, and why, despite those advantages, I've mostly moved away from joints in my personal consumption. First up, the skill factor. Rolling a decent joint is actually kind of an art form. Your grind needs to be just right, not too fine, or it'll burn too fast and be harsh, not too coarse, or it won't stay together properly. You need to remove all the stems and seeds and any debris that'll poke through the paper or create uneven burning. The rolling itself requires technique. Too tight and it won't draw properly, too loose and it'll canoe or run on one side. I got good at it through repetition, rolling hundreds or maybe thousands of joints over the years. But not everyone has that skill, and honestly, why should they need to develop it? If you're not naturally good at rolling, you're going to waste weed on poorly constructed joints that smoke terribly. You'll get frustrated. Your friends will get frustrated watching you struggle. It becomes this barrier to entry that doesn't need to exist. The bigger issue, though, is health-related, and this is where things get real. You're smoking paper. Let that sink in. Every time you smoke a joint, you're inhaling combusted paper along with your cannabis. And not just paper, glue too, because that's how rolling papers stay sealed. Now, some manufacturers have tried to address this by creating cleaner rolling papers. You've probably seen brands like Raw, which markets itself with all this natural, unrefined, organic hemp messaging. The packaging looks amazing. It sounds super clean and healthy, right? Except when you actually read the fine print on the package, and I literally had to take my glasses off to read this tiny text, you find this delightful warning. This product can expose you to chemicals including ethylene oxide, which is known to the state of California to cause cancer and birth defects or other reproductive harm. Wait, what? This is supposed to be the clean, natural, organic option, and it comes with a cancer warning? Yeah, because you're still smoking paper, and paper production involves chemicals. Always has, always will. Even the organic stuff isn't actually safe to inhale when it's burning. Before Raw came along, we had zigzags. Those were the classic rolling papers back in the 60s. We used to walk into convenience stores to buy them, and after a while, they wouldn't sell to us long-haired kids anymore because they knew exactly what we were doing with them. But whether it's zigzags, Raw, or any other brand, you're still combusting paper and inhaling it. And then there's the glue. I'll never forget this moment from the early 70s. I was at a friend's house, pulled out a joint, and said something like, "Hey, let's get lit." My friend looked at me and said, "I don't do glue." I was confused. "What do you mean you don't do glue?" He pointed at the joint. "That, you're smoking glue." It hit me like a brick. He was absolutely right. Every rolling paper has an adhesive strip that you lick to seal the joint. When that joint burns, you're inhaling whatever's in that adhesive, and I promise you, it's not good for your lungs. This matters to me because I'm actively trying to protect my respiratory system. I take specific steps when I use pipes to minimize harm, and we'll get into those techniques in another discussion. But one of the simplest harm reduction strategies is just avoiding joints altogether. Why would I intentionally add paper and glue smoke to the equation when I don't have to? If you've got healthy young lungs and you're not worried about it, fine. That's your calculation to make. But if you're older, if you have any respiratory issues, if you care about long-term lung health, this is something to seriously consider. Here's the issue that really pushed me away from joints: the sheer waste involved. If you're buying your cannabis legally and paying dispensary prices, this should matter to you from a purely financial standpoint. Let me show you what I mean with a concrete example. I have an 1/8 teaspoon measuring spoon. When I smoke from a pipe, I dip this tiny spoon into my finely ground cannabis. And yes, I grind it very fine for pipe use, which you wouldn't want for joints, and I fill it up. Maybe I round it over slightly so there's just a bit more than an 1/8 of a teaspoon. That's it. That's my dose. One hit from my pipe with that amount, and I'm good. That's all I need. The effects kick in, I'm at the level I want to be, I'm done. Now try to roll a joint with an 1/8 of a teaspoon of cannabis. Go ahead, I'll wait. It's not happening. You need way more material just to create a smokable joint. Depending on joint size, you're looking at a 1/4 gram minimum, probably 1/2 gram for a decent-sized joint, maybe a full gram for something substantial. But Eddie, you might say, that's not fair. I'm not smoking the whole joint in one session. That could last me all day or multiple sessions. Fair point, except here's what happens. Once you light that joint and smoke part of it, then extinguish it, you've got burnt cannabis sitting there at the end. When you relight it later, you're smoking that degraded, oxidized, harsh material. Unless you're meticulously trimming off the burnt end with scissors before each session, and who actually does that? You're getting a progressively worse smoking experience. When I use a pipe, I load exactly what I need for one hit. I smoke it completely. There's no waste, no degraded material, no harsh burnt taste. I can make a gram of cannabis last a remarkably long time using this method, a really long time. With joints, you can easily burn through a whole gram in one joint. It's not even hard to do. The math is brutal when you think about dispensary prices. If you're paying $30 or $40 for an eighth and you're going through it twice as fast smoking joints versus using a pipe, that's real money you're burning up, literally. And then there's the roach, that last bit of the joint that becomes too small to hold or smoke comfortably. There's still cannabis in there, still potentially good material, but it's functionally wasted unless you're collecting roaches to break down and smoke later, which, let's be honest, is pretty desperate and tastes awful. I used to get really obsessive about this. I had these little surgical scissors, and I'd try to smoke the joint right down to the absolute end, capturing every last bit of the good stuff. But there's always waste. There's always cannabis left in that roach that you're not using. Here's an embarrassing confession that I can laugh about now. Back in the day, I used to eat my roaches. I'm not kidding. I'd smoke the joint down as far as possible with those tiny surgical scissors, and then I'd just swallow what was left because I convinced myself I wasn't wasting anything. I actually thought I was being smart about this. What I didn't understand at the time, because I was young and dumb, is that eating raw cannabis does basically nothing. THC needs to be decarboxylated to be psychoactive, which means it needs heat to activate. Just swallowing burnt plant material doesn't get you high. It doesn't do anything except make you feel slightly stupid when you realize this years later. But that desperation to not waste expensive cannabis by smoking it in joint form, that was real. And it's completely avoidable by just using more efficient consumption methods. So, where does all this leave us? Here's my honest assessment. Joints are great for specific situations. If you're at a social gathering where passing something around is part of the experience, joints make sense. If you need maximum portability and discretion for a concert or outdoor event, joints work perfectly. If you genuinely love the ritual and ceremony of rolling and smoking them, and you're willing to accept the trade-offs, then go for it. I'm not going to tell you what to do. But if you're like me, if you're thinking about lung health, if you're concerned about efficiency and waste, if you want to make your cannabis last longer and get more consistent effects, then pipes or other consumption methods make a lot more sense. It's a risk-benefit calculation that everyone needs to make for themselves. Weigh the pros I've outlined against the cons. Think about what matters most to you. Consider your health situation, your budget, your consumption patterns, and your priorities. For me, the math stopped adding up. The romance and convenience of joints couldn't overcome the health concerns, the inefficiency, and the waste. Your calculation might be different, and that's completely fine. We're all adults here, capable of making informed decisions about our own consumption. The key word there is informed. Now you have the information. You understand the trade-offs. Whatever you decide to do with that information is entirely up to you. I work mostly with older adults and seniors who are getting back into cannabis after years away, or who are exploring it for the first time now that it's legal and accessible. People dealing with sleep issues, anxiety, chronic pain, or using it to enhance meditation and mindfulness practices. If that describes you and you want some guidance navigating this stuff, I do one-on-one consultations where we can talk through your specific situation and figure out what consumption methods and products make the most sense for your needs. But whether you work with me or not, whether you smoke joints or use pipes or vaporize or take edibles, the goal is the same: harm reduction and making informed choices. Understanding what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what the trade-offs are. Cannabis is an incredible plant with enormous therapeutic and recreational value. It's helped millions of people, and it'll help millions more. But like anything else, how you consume it matters. The method you choose impacts your experience, your health, and your wallet. Joints have their place, they're not going anywhere, and I'm not trying to eliminate them from existence. But for everyday personal use, especially as you get older and start thinking more seriously about long-term health, there are better options available. Options that are more efficient, less harsh on your lungs, and ultimately more sustainable both financially and physically. That's why I almost never smoke joints anymore. Not because I'm judging people who do, but because I found methods that work better for my needs and priorities. Your mileage may vary, and that's perfectly okay. Make your choices with your eyes open. Know what you're trading for what, and whatever you decide, enjoy this amazing plant responsibly and sustainably. That's all any of us can do.